testing. Okay. Baldur's Gate 3. I'm going to play a Drow Paladin. She's Seldarine Drow, which is the good Drow. The other option is Loth, evil. So I'm going to be a Paladin, and I'm going to multi-class with a sorcerer. So this is going to be a Sorkadin build. So I think I've made all the adjustments that I want. So we're ready to proceed with the game.
You need a guardian. Choose one.
I have no idea what the Guardian is. I'm just looking something up here. Okay, so it has something related to the primary storyline.
Remarkable. Truly.
Well, that seems like a good start. Wilhelm scream. Oh, those are like teleporters. Okay, so the way this game works is when you're not in combat, it's real time. So isometric, move around, explore, click on things.
Don't waste a step.
When you go into combat, it all the parties, all the party, anybody a part of the combat rolls an initiative roll, and it you get ranked from one to how many ever uh, characters or mobs or whatever are in the combat. So first to last, and then so if you're got a high initiative, you get to roll first, and then you get to uh, do your actions. And uh, you can move, you can attack, and there's some extra bonus actions that you can take. And then once you've completed your turn, you tell the system that that you're done, and then the next person gets to do their attack. So the combat ends up being slower paced, but it's very tactical.
This is the pool that thing came from. The parasite now writhing behind your eye.
So in the first part that I didn't record, you're captured, and he puts a squid, and it climbs in behind your eye. And the life cycle of the big baddie is called mind flare, and this is how they propagate. Or, so they capture somebody, and it slowly takes over your mind. So when you perform certain actions, it's controlled by dice rolls. Um, you know, a 1d20, meaning it's a dice, 20 sides, with 1 to 20 on the faces. And certain skills that we have are also influenced by perks, your level, your class, your race, and those get applied to that roll. So whatever is this investigation check, we have to beat a 10. So if you beat the 10, you get to perform that action successfully. If you fail, then you know it doesn't complete successfully, and so sometimes can be consequences of not meeting a roll. So we get to click the dice. We got a 7, and then since my intelligence is low, it reduced it, and so we lost the roll.
You
So
notice nothing more than meets the eye.
so now we can't perform that task again, but I can be. I was going to reach in, but it collapsed. It might have been successful with the reach in had I done that first.
Something good here, I hope.
So, like all good RPGs, you investigate, uh, you click on everything, and you take everything.
Dead.
You take everything
Good.
that's not nailed down. I need to adjust the volume. This is a little loud in my ears, so it's probably a little loud on the stream. So, whoop, too low. Now, I started this um, earlier today when it was active on my smaller monitor. So I think it's running at a lower resolution than it should be. So I am going to reset the game. So we're going to put that up. You should still be able to hear me. So I already saved it, so I'm going to quit out. And then this is going to allow me to restart the game. And then hopefully look much better. Also, it's processing Vulkan shaders. So that's going to take a minute. Um, so while we're waiting for the game to process shaders, I'll share some Baldur's Gate info. So this is the map of the region that we're going to be after we escape the ship. So lots of different items. And then the star of the show is Baldur's Gate, the town. And I've not yet found a good map of Baldur's Gate, the town. But it's big, and we'll be able to explore the whole thing without cutscenes. Well, the Vulcan shading or buildings, it kind of slowed down at 22%. So that might be a little bit before it's done. So at character selection, there was a question about picking a guardian, and this is kind of like a spoiler-free discussion about what the guardian does, and it apparently will you interact with the mind flare parasite powers that are given to you, and then you go sleep back at camp. That's when that comes into play. Uh, so Baldur's Gate is a town, a city. It's a big city that takes place in the fantasy realm of, I want to get it, Faerun, the same world that Drizzt and the Wolfgar take place. Let me see if I can show the map. Faerun. We'll get to a map. a very good map. Here we go. Well, that's a little big. Let's drop that down to medium resolution. Man, I got a slow website. Or I'm not the only person that wants to see a map as they start playing the biggest RPG in years. Okay, this looks like a good map. Oh yeah, and I can adjust the zoom. So that looks like a good zoom level. So let me zoom out. So Drist or Drizzt, however you want to say it, when he finally escaped the Underdark, he ended up here. And I believe now it has been years since I've listened to those audiobooks. But let me see if I can. So right here where my pointer is, this is where Drizzt, I'm going to say Drizzt because that's how I prefer to say it. I don't care if it's wrong. He's from Menzoberranzan, I believe. So it takes place here. And his dwarf friend, whose name escapes me right now, have an ancestral home here in Mithril Hall. Now they end up fighting at some point. Oh, here's Icewind Dale, Kelwyn's Cairn, 10 towns. So the first, the books were written out of order, but I read them in chronological order. So the first couple books is about Drizzt's corrupt society. They're evil, run by they're matriarchal, and he escapes, and he ends up all the way up here, and they have some he meets up some people that become lifelong friends, and then Baldur's Gate, where the Baldur's Gate 1, 2, and 3 now the games named after this city here. And you'll sometime hear that Baldur's Gate is located on the Sword Coast, and that's what this part of the ocean is called. So there's the Ed Greenwood, I believe, is credited, or he wrote the first story about Faerun, came up with it, started some writing stories in this world, and other authors, lots of other authors, have written stories that take place, and there's a bunch of the tabletop game campaigns that take place in this world. And so it's got a lot of history, a lot of stories throughout many different books and tabletop adventures. And we're at 31% on the Vulcan shaders. I don't want to skip it because the game was looking like wasn't looking all that great. I guess it wouldn't hurt. We could do a a little bit of the history of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. I shared this with Thea the other day. And it was Baldur Gate recap.
Assassinations and having into Avernus as they link into Baldur's. The Sword Coast provides the backdrop for the first adventure in the Baldur's Gate series, with Baldur's Gate itself being the largest and most populated city in the region. It's important to keep the world of Faerun, the Sword Coast and Baldur's Gate in mind, as players will be revisiting the world in its new form come the release of Baldur's Gate 3. Set in the year 1368 of Dale Reckoning, or DR, the main story revolves around the in-world factions such as the Flaming Fist and Black Talons, but mainly focuses around the main player character searching for their own ancestry and history, all while thwarting a mysterious armoured figure. Baldur's Gate allows you to create a character to call your own or pick from a number of pre-generated ones. In the Enhanced Edition, one of these individuals is a human male named Abdel Adrian, who is actually the canonical main character in the Baldur's Gate books and Forgotten Realms lore outside of the game. Whatever your character, the story origins are the same, being raised in the Fortress Library of Candlekeep south of Baldur's Gate with your friend and first companion Imoen, and the adopted father figure of your story, the mage Gorion. At this point in the story, you learn that strange things are afoot in the realm, with iron production mysteriously halting, metal crumbling as if cursed by magic, and ne'er-do-wells scouring the land taking iron and metals as their treasure. The walls of the Fortress Monastery are no longer safe, as bandits make an attempt on the player's life. Upon leaving Candlekeep with Gorion, you are ambushed by bandits led by the dark armoured figure from the opening cutscene. Somewhat gruesomely, Gorion defeats most of the enemies, but dies doing so as the player character flees and reunites with Imoen, your first companion in the campaign. This starts the first proper chapter of Baldur's Gate, and as the player makes their way east, they may encounter and recruit Montaron, the halfling fighter, and Zar, the mad human necromancer, before making their way to the Friendly Arm Inn and battling the mage Tarnesh and his mirror images. Inside the inn, you will find two more potential companions, Khalid, the stammering neutral good half-elf fighter, and his wife, the half-elf fighter druid, Jaheira. Regardless of who you choose to accompany, the story of Baldur's Gate is further south toward the town of Nashkel, its carnival, and the mines. While danger is still looming over the player and another attempt on their life will be made, the most important part of visiting this town is that you have the potential of recruiting one of the best companions in the Baldur's Gate series. I am of course talking about the true neutral, neurotic berserker ranger, Minsk, and his miniature space hamster, Boo.
Stand and deliver, that my hamster might have a better look at you.
You may also meet Volo in the town's tavern, a legendary traveller, storyteller and returning character to Baldur's Gate 3. But let's pause for a moment. From what we've played and seen in trailers, that makes at least 3 characters who will be returning to Baldur's Gate 3. Balarion's entry into the franchise is set in 1492 DR, over 100 years later. So how can these folks and Space Hamster still be alive? Well, Jaheira is a half-elf, and within the setting, half-elves have an average lifespan of around 180 years, which explains how she looks a little older in Baldur's Gate 3. Volo fell prey to an imprisonment spell sometime before 1385 DR, where he remained for 100 years until he was eventually able to continue his scholarly pursuits. Minsk and Boo, however, decided that after defeating many of the evils that plagued Baldur's Gate, that they would allow themselves to be petrified until a time where heroes were needed once more. Their statue was named the Beloved Ranger and stood in Baldur's Gate until sometime in the 1480s, where
Minsk was he was probably a barbarian or definitely a warrior fighter in the original game, and he's quite the character. He's always talking about his pet hamster, but the Boo is invisible. You don't believe we ever get to see. Or was he in the inventory? I can't remember. But he would always, when he charged into battle, he would say, protect Boo and this, that, and the other. It was pretty humorous.
Where through the events of the comic book Legends of Baldur's Gate, the errant effects of Mage Delina's wild magic dispelled Minsk and Boo's petrification, which explains how Minsk has retained much of his youthful complexion. But
I remember now. Boo was in his inventory, and if you tried to click on the icon of Boo and move it to another character, he would slip out of your hands and always go back to Minsk. You couldn't take Boo out of his inventory.
But with all of the magic, pocket dimensions, long-living races and more, I'm sure there will be even more returning characters, both big and small, we have yet to meet. With that out of the way, let's continue with our recap. It is the kobold-filled mines that will be the next waypoint through the player's story. The chapter culminating in a battle against Mulahay, an evil cleric summoning hordes of kobolds and skeletons. Defeating him and taking his holy seal will lead you to Beregost, where you volunteer to take care of a local bandit problem, culminating in a fight with bandits Raymond, Vengt, Hacked, and Brittic as you loot their letters and continue to chapter 4. Push through Cloakwood, flood a mine, defeat the mage Davion, and finally you are able to head to the city that shares its name with its RPG epic, Baldur's Gate. Upon first arriving, you will meet Scar, second in command of the Flaming Fist, the mercenary company tasked with keeping peace and upholding law to the northern half of the Sword Coast.
I serve the Flaming Fist!
While here, you may also recruit the bard Eldoth Kron and his partner, the thief Sky Silvershield, the daughter of one of the dukes of Baldur's Gate. In Baldur's Gate, you will meet Duke Eltan, one of the 4 dukes of the city and leader of the Flaming Fist. It is he who will task you with investigating the Iron Throne, a shady merchant organization that is also known for assassinations and having contracts with enemy states. You discover that this organization's leaders are in fact back in Candlekeep, the previous library fortress that you once called home. Agreeing to head there and pursue your leads will have Duke Eltan teleport you back to Candlekeep and begin chapter 6. As you gain access back to the keep and explore your once familiar surroundings, it appears that things are not quite what they once were. Explorations find a previously unread letter for the player character written by your guardian Gorion, although finding this will also lead to the player's arrest, then being found guilty regardless of charisma checks and evidence, forcing you to be teleported into the lower catacombs that are teeming with the doppelgangers that now control the keep. All of this has been orchestrated by Saravok, the armoured figure that killed Gorion in the prologue and is now inhabiting Candlekeep with the rulers of the Iron Throne disguised as Koravas. I also can't believe that I didn't realise until now that Koravas is just Saravok backwards. I'm not sure how I missed that when I originally played the game, but anyway. Under Candlekeep, you'll also seemingly be reunited with Gorion, but it is in fact doppelgangers taking his form. Through the twisted forms of old friends as well as enemy basilisks, eventually the player character is able to escape from Candlekeep and return to Baldur's Gate in Chapter 7. However, Baldur's Gate is now in the grip of the new head of the Flaming Fist, the corrupt Angelo Dosan working for Saravok. Facing arrests and hostilities, the player is framed for crimes against Baldur's Gate, and you must find the evidence needed to clear your name and return the city to peace, either avoiding the Flaming Fist or killing them. Throughout your investigation, you find that the situation has been orchestrated by that same armoured figure, Saravok. It is through your searches that you find out that Saravok is in fact your half-brother with machinations of godhood. Both he and the player character are Baal spawn, mortal children that are born from the Lord of Murder, Baal. To prolong his life, Baal would have his children sacrificed by priests in a bloody ritual in an effort to circumvent the prophecy of his death. This ritual, however, was thwarted by Gorion and a group of Harpers, an organisation dedicated to maintaining the balance between good and evil. While Gorion took the player character in and raised them, Saravok was left to wander the streets alone until he was taken in by the Iron Throne leader. His plan was to use the Iron Throne and the Sword Coast bandits to drive Baldur's Gate and arm to war, thus starting murder and bloodshed on a massive scale and using that power to ascend to his own godhood and assume the new mantle of Lord of Murder. Upon confronting Saravok, you will be thrown into what is likely the hardest battle you've yet to face, but beating him will show him having the essence of Baal being snatched from him as it is pulled back to its domain. Thus ends the original story of Baldur's Gate, although the Siege of Dragonspear DLC that came with the enhanced edition of Baldur's Gate continues the story that ended in 1998. The expansion starts with you clearing out the remains of Saravok's followers, but the weeks that follow Saravok's demise, all of your followers apart from Imoen have left, and there are rumours that the player character did not defeat Saravok for the good of the land, but so they could take his place. But for now, as the rest of his forces are being mopped up, the story shifts focus to a crusade by a warrior named Kalar Argent, also known as the Shining Lady. Being sent north by a contingent of Flaming Fist soldiers, alongside warnings that the Shining Lady is making her way down the Sword Coast and is threatening the city, the mercenaries have orders to stop their advance at the castle of Dragonspear. One of the early battles that take place between the coalition from Baldur's Gate and Kalar's forces takes place along the river where Baal, the player's father, had been killed by Cyric the Mad, Prince of Lies, many years earlier. After the battle, the player will suffer a vision of Baal's death and burns the symbol of the god of murder into the bridge, something that understandably the surrounding soldiers don't take kindly to. The party must then sneak into Dragonspear Castle to gain intel about the Shining Lady, although instead discovers one of her lieutenants Herfanan speaking to an unknown source. After skirmishes and an assault on the keep, your party and allied soldiers attack Dragonspear Castle, trapping Kalar in the keep as her chief lieutenant Herfanan casts a paralysis spell over the whole castle. Herfanan, however, traps both allied and enemy forces alike, revealing their true plans of travelling into the Nine Hells and unleashing his master to the material plane. As the spell dissipates, Kalar and the player venture through a portal into the hellish dimension in pursuit of their new common enemy, before Herfanan can unleash the demon Belefet. This section takes place in the first layer of the Nine Hells Avernus, a location that we know we will be returning to in Baldur's Gate 3, as it is here where the prologue of the game begins. After the defeat of demon and summoner alike, the Shining Lady reveals that her true intentions was to free her uncle from the Nine Hells, and that her crusade was an effort to revive him. As penance for the blood spilled, Kalar remains in the Nine Hells to guard the portal. The player returns to the mortal plane to celebrate another victory, but that night is wrecked by nightmares and visions of being attacked by an avatar of Baal, twisted from the form of Sky Silvershield as you defend yourself in a terrorized state. You awaken from the dream, however, to find Sky Silvershield dead, stabbed seemingly by your hand, and with the clerics unable to revive her as her soul is trapped in the dagger that killed her. You are slapped in irons and dragged back to Baldur's Gate to answer for your apparent crimes. The discovery that you are set up by the Hooded Man comes to you as the figure himself visits in an effort to twist the player into obeying their murderous bloodline. As you escape into the woods, however, you are reunited with Imoen. So begins the story of Baldur's Gate 2, Shadows of Arm. You awaken in the dungeon of the elven mage Irenicus, the main antagonist of Baldur's Gate 2, as he performs some less than savoury experiments on you. The being currently probing and prodding you with steel and magic was in fact the Hooded Man from Siege of Dragonspear, completing the link between the games. A side note is that in the original release of this game, Irenicus was of the human race, but was intended to be an elf, which was fixed in the enhanced edition of the game that was released years later. It is a familiar face that saves you from the bonds of captivity, as the first companion of the previous game becomes the first companion of this one. Imoen unlocks your cage and you move forward and rescue other familiar faces, unlocking Jaheira's cage and goading Minsk with the loss of his beloved Dynahir into using his berserker rage to burst his open. While making your way past genies, goblins and dryads, Jaheira will learn of the death of her husband, another previous potential companion, Khalid. Throughout your exploration, companion Imoen will start to utter some peculiar dialogue, hinting that things may not be as they seem. Upon leaving the catacombs, you come face to face with Irenicus, as he utterly tears his enemies apart with magic. Imoen casts magic missiles of her own, and for their use of unsanctioned magic in the city of Athkatla, both are apprehended by the Cowled Wizards. As you journey through the slums of Athkatla, you will meet Galen Bale, who will know how to rescue Imoen, but needs a whopping 20,000 gold pieces to share that information. Chapter 2 begins with Bale starting you on the quest to earn that impressive pile of gold. Chapter 2 also contains one of the most important decisions in Shadows of Arm. Once you have 15,000 gold from completing quests, raiding enemies, and selling items, you will be approached by a mysterious woman named Valen, urging you to meet her mistress Bodhi in the Graveyard District. You'll also be offered a similar message by Galen, offering to reduce that 20k to 15 if you choose to meet him instead. These two paths lead you into a decision you must make at the culmination of Chapter 2. Side with Bodhi and the Vampire Coven or Galen's Guild of Shadow Thieves. Go to the graveyard and meet Bodhi and choose to side with the vampires and attack the Shadow Thieves, or give the money to Galen and take down the vampires instead. Each party will offer you help to rescue Imoen, and only through making this choice can you progress the main story. Attacking the Vampire Guild will lead you to the docks and graveyard districts, finding guild defectors and killing them for their involvement with the Vampire Guild. You'll learn of their contact in the Athkatla graveyard, which leads you to the vampire's lair. There you are faced with spiders, traps, golems, and more deadly encounters until you find the coffins of the sleeping vampires and drive stakes through the hearts of the hibernating beasts. However, killing the three vampires, Geller, Durst, and Lasalle, will summon Bodhi. She is an extremely difficult enemy, as only blunt weapons will work against her, but once you have wounded her sufficiently, she will flee. Quest complete, the Shadow Thieves will hold up to their end of the bargain and grant you passage to the island where Imoen and Irenicus are being held by the Cowled Wizards. If, however, you choose to side with the vampires, you will have to kill Galen Bale in his home and fight your way through the Shadow Thief training grounds until you encounter the Wizard Haz and take down Aran Linvale. Doing so will allow you to learn of Bodhi's relationship with Irenicus. The vampires then escort you to a ship that will take you to the island where the prison Spellhold is located. In Chapter 4, there will be some changes to the quests and events depending on your allegiance. If you side with the thieves, for example, the ship captain may betray you and summon vampires to attack your party. As you make your way through the island and to Spellhold, Irenicus will make himself known to you as one of the Cowled Wizards. And if Yoshimo is in your party, he will also reveal himself to be working with the evil Elven Mage. At the climax of Baldur's Gate, you learned that you were a child of Baal, the god of murder. But it turns out, like yourself, Imoen is one of Baal's children also, and Irenicus' goal is to drain that power from you through of course, a magical ritual which you will enter into a dream. In this dream, you will face a demon who will permanently reduce one of your stats by 1, and who you can only defeat by finding Imoen in this realm between realms and facing Baal together.
I have drained you of the very thing that made you special. It is the worst of curses, I should know.
Through this, Irenicus has stolen your divine spirit and has ordered the vampire Bodhi to kill you. You're able to escape through the labyrinthine corridors of Spellhold and are faced with a choice as how you leave the island, either via portal or by ship. Regardless of your choice, you will end up in the Underdark. The Underdark is a network of many huge caverns under the world of Faerun and Baldur's Gate, and inhabited by some of the most dangerous entities in the realms. It's a space we've seen featured in Baldur's Gate 3, but here, as you escape the island of Spellhold, you will see the first glimpse of the bizarre landscape and creatures that call this place home. In order to gain access to the Drow city in the Underdark, you must complete a quest for Galander Blackenrock. Defeating the beast Baldur will net you the reward of transformation, with the silver dragon Adalon transforming your party into Drow to allow you entrance through their gates, and tasking you with finding her lost dragon eggs, stolen by Irenicus. Through the city, you'll be facing enemies and allies that you will again recognise if you've been keeping up to date with Baldur's Gate 3. Both Mind Flayers and Githyanki can be found through the darkest areas of the city. While Mind Flayers are not the main enemies in the game as they appear to be in Baldur's Gate 3, they are still an extremely dangerous, insidious, brain-infecting race. The main goal here is to recover the aforementioned dragon eggs, and doing so will teleport you from the Underdark city of Usnathar to the surface alongside Aladon, and right into the middle of your next large battle at the start of Chapter 6. So now, back in the real world, the next step is to try to recover your soul and Imoen's from Bodhi and Irenicus. Surrounded by elves, you must prove your allegiance and disdain for the evil mage who you now hunt to Commander Elhan. Doing so will secure you passage back to the city of Athkatla, where your adventure started, and eventually to the graveyard where you may have first met the vampire Cabal, who you now pursue. Finally, defeating the vampire Bodhi and driving a wooden stake through her heart will allow Imoen to reclaim her soul, as you venture on towards the elven city of Suldanesalar. Once in the city, you will be advised to speak to the elven queen Elzame. You'll be presented with the talisman of Rilliphane, the elven god of protection and guardian of harmony, and be tasked with recovering powerful elven artifacts and symbols to allow you passage to the Tree of Life. Irenicus and his minions are found to be sapping the energy from the Elven World Tree with parasites. Killing these will summon Irenicus now that he has been cut off from the tree's energy. Upon delivering the final blow to the antagonist that has plagued you since you escaped his clutches back at the start of the game, his soul will be dragged down into the Nine Hells. However, you and your party die with him, and your souls will too be taken into the Abyss. It seems that your fate is not yet sealed within the Hells, as you are given the option to open the abyssal door back to the material realm by offering up 5 tears of Baal, earned by completing the challenges set in Hell. Your actions in these trials may change the alignment of your character, with them potentially falling to evil, and in the story of the game representing the player giving in to the dark influence of the Lord of Murder. You'll encounter the wraith form of the antagonist from Baldur's Gate 1, Saravok, representing wrath, as well as other demons of greed, selfishness, fear, and pride. Securing a tear from each demon grants you a boon depending on how you acquired it. For example, in the Trial of Pride, sparing the dragon will grant you 20% resistance to all elemental damage, but killing it will give your character a whopping 20,000 XP. Regardless of the choices you made, good or evil, the 5 tiers will lead you to the final battle against the damned Irenicus and his demons, the toughest encounter of the game, and a fight for your very soul. Delivering the final blow will see it return back to you as you continue to live as Baalspawn. This is, however, not the end of the prophecy, with the story of your party continuing into the expansion, The Throne of Baal. After the battle in Hell, you awaken to find yourself in a sacred grove of ancient gods after being refused access to the Elven City because of your Baalspawn bloodline. This plane will be the start of the final unfolding of that prophecy that has followed your character since the beginning of the very first game. This pocket plane contains other Baalspawn that are all trying to kill each other and also you in an attempt to ascend to the throne of the Lord of Murder. This area also contains the soul of Saravok, your Baalspawn half-brother and the antagonist of the first Baldur's Gate game, who is available as a companion and advisor if you agree to give him part of your soul. Leaving this pocket plane, the journey continues in the city of Saradush. where you will meet Melisande and the leader of the town, Gromnir Ilkhan, who mistakes you for invaders and will immediately attack. When you finally confront Gromnir and defeat them, Melisande shares with you that the other Balspawn besieging the city is in fact invincible, and urges you to find a way to make them vulnerable to death once again, something accomplished by finding his disembodied heart in the Marching Mountains. Continuing the path and defeating the 5 legendary Balspawn will bring you back to the Pocket Plane where seemingly your task is complete, although the truth of the matter is that Melisande, who has been helping in the dismantling of the Balspawn, is in fact Emilsan, mastermind of the 5 and a high priestess of Baal himself, who was tasked with resurrecting the god of murder. But she doesn't just betray you, she also betrays a deceased god as she desires to take the throne and ascend to godhood herself. This is the toughest fight of the saga so far, against a powerful mage and cleric who summons abyssal monsters to fight alongside her as she saps the energy needed for her evil godly ascent. During the final attacks, when you're about to finish your story and she is near death, the celestial solar beings appear and grant victory to you, the player character. Your final choice is to either release all of the taint of Baal that you have absorbed during your fights with their spawn and allow the solar to remove all essence of the god of murder from the world, or absorb what's left of it and become a god yourself. Whatever you decide, the ending will be influenced by the choices and the good or evil alignment that follows through the game. And as the party makes their final comments on your actions, the final act of Baldur's Gate 2 comes to a close. But a lot can happen in 100 years, especially in the Forgotten Realms. Larian has said that Baldur's Gate 3 takes place immediately after the Dungeons & Dragons module Descent into Avernus, which acts somewhat as a prequel to Baldur's Gate 3. Skip this bit if you're currently playing through the campaign yourself, but the broad strokes is that whole cities are being dragged into hell, with the holy city of Elturel having disappeared from the Forgotten Realms as it descended into Avernus, with the next city at risk being the nearby Baldur's Gate. In Larian's version of events, the campaign ends with a party of heroes saving the city of Elturel, but any other details or connection between the events of this campaign and the story of Baldur's Gate 3 have yet to be discovered, except that the location of your crash landing at the start of the game appears to be somewhere between Baldur's Gate and Elturel itself. What is next though, dear adventurers, is up to you. With a massive game filled with lore and
Okay, so I hope that brings you up to speed up with the lore of the game. We're at 58% on the Vulkan shader processing, which is a pain in the butt because it's already been 20 minutes. So it's probably going to be another 20 minutes. Okay, well, I can make you we'll listen through how I plan on building my source, my Paladin.
Of many other features that we have. We will be in melee, meaning we'll be getting hit often. High constitution means higher health, and we'll be concentrating on spells pretty often too. And a high constitution will lend itself by helping us with our concentration saves. And we'd also want good strength so we can smack our enemies with our weapon to deliver smites. Not to mention that there are strength requirements to wearing heavy armor. A balanced stat line could be 16 strength, 10 dexterity, 14 constitution, 8 intellect, 10 wisdom, and 17 charisma after racial bonuses. And if you're playing a dex-based Sarkadin, then you can swap out strength and dexterity. And if you have the option to have a 10 in intellect or wisdom, it's up to you on which one you want to be even, since both have nasty CC spells associated with them. However, I think wisdom is the better choice because there's a lot more mind spells, at least in my experience. But again, the choice is yours. Now on to the basics of the build. We're going to be using a mixture of slinging spells and swinging our weapon, either with a two-hander or a one-handed weapon and shield. Typically, we'll be shooting out spells with our quick and meta magic as a bonus action, and then smacking fools with our big-ass weapon. Not sure if Booming Blade or other attack cantrips will be in, but once we hit higher levels, we won't miss it too much. Did I mention that we're going to be smacking fools with our weapon? Well, don't forget, we picked Paladin, so we can smite the hell out of anything that's in our way. That's the main reason why we picked this build, so we can have extra spell slots to smite if we're not actually using those spell slots. Typically, if we do actually want to cast spells, we want a mix of blasting, crowd control, defensive, or self-buff spells. I'll go over which spells specifically we want to look for in the leveling guide. The other nuanced portion of this build is determining how many levels you want of each class. There are many debates on which is the most optimal path. Do we go 6 levels of Paladin for your aura, 7 for the Oath aura? Some builds even just use 2 levels of Paladin, so they have access to higher level sorcerer spells. You can go all day discussing the pros and cons of each. Ultimately, at the end of the day, play what you think is thematic and what feels right to you. Because D&D is all about choice. There is no right or wrong way to play, especially since this is designed to be a single-player game, even though you can play with friends. Alright, so that was a lot to talk about, because there are so many options you can choose. Pick what you like for your theme or flavor. Not every character has to be the most powerful. That being said, we'll get into our leveling guides, and we'll actually be showcasing 2 different builds here, since there are so many options. The first build we'll build is a strength-focused one that will be a 6-6-6 split, and will start as a Sage background half-elf of the High Elf variety, picking your favorite cantrip as a level 1 Oath of Ancients Paladin, grabbing Persuasion and Athletics as our skills. At level 2, we can either grab the Great Weapon Fighting or Duelist fighting styles, and fight with a shield. Since this is a strength-based build, we'll just go ahead and use that big beefy two-hander. Though Sword and Board is always a great option. Pick what you like. For spells, we'll be picking up Bless, Thunderous Smite, Cure Wounds. You can always swap out these choices when you long rest as a Paladin, since they are prepared casters. At level 3, we'll gain our Channel Oath abilities. We can also gain another spell. This time I picked up Shield of Faith. At level 4, we can grab an ASI or feat. There are tons of great feat options for us to pick from, but without a doubt the first one we should always grab is Warcaster, which will do a ton for us. It gives us advantage on our concentration checks. It'll allow us to cast a spell even with our hands full, although I'm not sure if this is an issue in Baldur's Gate 3. And whenever we make an opportunity attack, we can replace it with a spell. I'm really excited to see if this works in Baldur's Gate 3 like it does in Tabletop. If it does, that's going to be awesome. At level 5, we'll get our extra attack and we'll choose our level 2 Paladin spells. We'll grab Lesser Restoration and hopefully find Steed here, if it's in the launch. Otherwise, you can just pick whatever you want. At level 6, we'll wrap up our Paladin levels, unless you want to get that Ancient Aura, which might be valuable if not to help protect your allies from enemies, but from your own wild magic outbursts. Oh, that's right, I didn't mention. In this build, we're doing wild magic sorcery. And at level 7, we'll begin our plunge into Sorcerer. We can begin this journey at level 3, but for simplicity's sake, we'll just keep it here at level 7. We'll pick up the Wild Magic Sorcerer with your favorite blasting or utility cantrips, and pick up Thunder Wave and Shield. Or pick up utility spells like Jump and Featherfall. At level 8, we will grab our second level of Sorcerer, gaining our Sorcerer points, and you can also grab another level 1 spell, such as Absorb Elements, or utility spell. At level 9, we'll get our Meta Magic and grab Quicken and whatever Meta Magic you like. And for level 2 spells, we'll pick up Web and a Blasting spell. At level 10, we get our first ASI. Level 10, we'll get our next ASI/feat. We can choose to bump our stats here, but there are also some great combat feat options as well, such as Great Weapon Master or Polearm Master. But with Tides of Chaos being a reliable way to get advantage, let's do Great Weapon Master here. At level 11, we'll pick 5th level Sorcerer, and we'll finally be getting access to our level 3 Sorcerer spells. Counterspell is always an auto-include, in my opinion. Fly is pretty great too, especially being a melee character to get you around everywhere. But there are some pretty sweet blasting options in crowd control, or even buff spells here too. I like to pick Vampiric Touch for self-heals, or the notorious Fireball. But 3rd level blasting spells might not be the best option this late into the game. And at level 12, we'll wrap up the build with the final point in Sorcerer, getting our 6th level feature, which isn't all too crazy, so you can decide to pick 7 levels of Paladin, like I suggested earlier, if you prefer to pick up that Resistance Aura. I really enjoy this build for flavor, as you're a defender of the Feywilds, and in turn, it will grant you incredible magic abilities beyond even your control, which can lead to some fun or funny endeavors. Typical pre-combat phase would be buff yourself with Bless or another buff, and when combat begins, your turns will usually be to launch a Quicken spell, such as Hold Person or a Blast spell, and then attacking them with your Greatsword, striking twice and hopefully smiting them, and dealing with whatever wild magic shenanigans that have been bestowed upon you. Hopefully it's a good thing, I hope. A thing to note though is if you do quick cast Hold Person and you succeed, your attacks will generally automatically crit, pretty sure. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's right. We'll pick up a White Dragon Sorcerer Githyanki with the Soldier background. Thematically,
So that's what I planned for the Paladin. And we are at 67%. Exciting stuff. Actually, what I should probably do is just go ahead and stop the stream, and then I'll restart it as part two when these Vulcan shaders are done. That way I can putz around, whatever. So I will let you know. So when the shaders are done. So be back in a bit. I'll come up and let you know when it's when I'm restarting. We're at 69%, so 15 minutes maybe, hopefully. So.